The imperial guards found him hiding in a dark wine cellar of a deserted villa, clutching a small vial of poison in his trembling hand. This wasn't some common criminal or desperate rebel. This was Sporus, barely 20 years old, once paraded as the Empress of Rome, now about to take his own life rather than face the horrors that awaited him in the Colosseum. But to understand how a boy could be transformed into a phantom wife, and why death itself seemed merciful, we must go back 3 years earlier, back to a grieving, half-mad emperor, and the most disturbing tale of obsession and cruelty in Roman history. This is not just another story of Roman decadence. This is the story of Emperor Nero, the man who murdered his pregnant wife, married a boy as her replacement, burned his own capital, and watched an empire slip from his grasp. And the most terrifying part, everything you are about to hear comes from Rome's own official records, the murder of Poppaea. Rome, 65 C. The most powerful man in the world had just become a murderer. Not through war or execution, those were routine in the empire. No. Emperor Nero had just killed his pregnant wife, Poppaea Sabina, with his own hands. Some sources describe a single, devastating kick to her swollen belly. Others, a savage beating that left her bleeding on the marble floor. Physicians rushed in, but even the emperor's divinity could not undo death. Poppaea was gone. This was the breaking point for Nero, a man already notorious for indulgence, paranoia, and cruelty. He was 28 years old, and yet his reign of terror was just beginning. The rise of a boy emperor 37 to 54 CE. To understand Nero, we must go back to the beginning. He was born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus in 37 CE. His father, a consul, was infamous for his temper and cruelty. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was ambitious, cunning, and determined to secure power for her son. When Emperor Claudius, Agrippina's uncle, married her, Nero was adopted into the Julio-Claudian dynasty. At just 16 years old, he became emperor after Claudius' suspicious death, a death many believed Agrippina had orchestrated with poisoned mushrooms. Rome now had a boy emperor, backed by one of its most ruthless women, the young Nero. Promise and performance. At first, Nero's reign showed promise. Guided by wise advisors like Seneca the Younger and the prefect Sporus, he lowered taxes, granted more freedoms to slaves, and presented himself as a generous, approachable ruler. But there was one problem. Nero didn't care for politics or administration. His true passion was performance, acting, singing, poetry, and the chariot races. For the Romans, the idea of an emperor performing on stage was shocking, degrading even. But Nero didn't care. He craved applause more than authority. Meanwhile, Agrippina's influence began to wane. She had raised her son to be emperor, but Nero had no intention of sharing the throne. By 59 CE, tensions between them reached a breaking point. Matricide, the murder of Agrippina. 59 CE. Nero devised a plot worthy of tragedy. He invited Agrippina to a banquet, lavished her with gifts, and persuaded her to board a ship built to collapse at sea. But Agrippina survived the wreck, swimming to shore. Desperate, Nero sent assassins to her villa. They stabbed her to death in her own bed. According to legend, her last words were chilling: "Smite my womb, for it bore such a monster." With his mother gone, Nero was free of restraint, but the crime stained him forever. An emperor as performer liberated from Agrippina, Nero immersed himself in the arts. He took the stage in theatrical performances, sang in competitions, and raced chariots. Courtiers and senators were forced to attend, applauding whether they wished to or not. To Nero, he was not just an emperor, he was Rome's greatest artist. To the Senate, he was humiliating the dignity of the empire. The emperor's vanity was growing, and so was his cruelty. The Great Fire of Rome 64 CE. On the night of July 18, 64 CE, Flames erupted in the Circus Maximus. For 9 days, fire consumed the city. 10 of Rome's 14 districts burned. Thousands were left homeless. Rumors spread quickly. Did Nero set the fire himself? Ancient historians disagree. Some claim he ordered the blaze to clear space for his extravagant Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace complex so vast it swallowed entire neighborhoods. Others insist he rushed back to Rome, organized relief efforts, and opened his gardens to refugees. But one detail stuck in the public imagination, that Nero stood on a rooftop, playing the lyre and singing of the fall of Troy, while his own capital burned. True or not? The image of Nero fiddling while Rome burned became immortal. To deflect blame, Nero accused a new religious sect, the Christians, of starting the fire. What followed was the empire's first great persecution. Christians were crucified, burned alive, and torn apart by beasts in the arena. The obsession with Poppaea and the tragedy of Sporus. Nero's private life grew darker. He married Poppaea Sabina, his mistress, and showered her with riches. But in a fit of rage, he struck her dead while she was pregnant with his child. Consumed with grief and madness, Nero sought a replacement. That's when he found Sporus, a beautiful teenage boy who resembled Poppaea. Nero ordered him castrated, dressed him in royal robes, and married him in a public ceremony. He paraded Sporus as his wife, even calling him Sabina. The boy became a living ghost, forced to play the role of a dead empress. It was one of the most disturbing acts of identity theft in history. Conspiracies and paranoia. By now the Senate and aristocracy despised Nero. In 65 CE, the Pisonian conspiracy attempted to assassinate him. The plot failed, but Nero's paranoia exploded. He ordered mass executions. Senators, generals, even his old tutor Seneca were forced to die by suicide. Rome had become a court of fear, revolt, and downfall. 68 CE. As the empire grew restless, revolts broke out. Governors in Gaul, Spain, and Africa refused loyalty. The Praetorian Guard, once sworn to protect Nero, abandoned him. The Senate declared him a public enemy. Alone, Nero fled Rome, begging his few remaining servants to help him die. When soldiers closed in, he drove a dagger into his throat, according to Suetonius. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me." He was 30 years old. Legacy of Nero. Nero's reign lasted just 14 years, but it left scars on Rome. He murdered his own mother and wife. He turned an empire into his stage. He burned the city and blamed the innocent. He transformed cruelty into performance. Some Romans mourned him, calling him generous and charismatic. Others cursed his name for centuries. But one thing is certain, Nero remains one of history's most infamous rulers, a symbol of power twisted by vanity, paranoia, and obsession. From a boy emperor to a monster who destroyed his own empire, Nero's story reminds us of a timeless truth. When rulers place themselves above their people, the empire may endure, but its soul burns away.